Namaste, dear listeners. Welcome to the Iowa channel Astro In with Abhi, Oneness in Astrology and Spirituality, bringing in awareness by Abhi. Today we're going to talk about Rahu and Ketu. What are these? Are these planets? What effects do they have in astrology? And how can I use them to lead a much more prosperous life? Now, Rahu and Ketu, there's a huge misconception. Some people call it shadow planets. Some people call them they are not planets at all. Some people call them roaming planets. Nevertheless, it's not important to understand exactly whether they are roaming planets or whether they're actually planets. If we can understand the dharma, the duty of both, we can then give them a desired structure. But for me personally, talking from awareness by Abhi, from my awareness, I would call them planets. Because for me, planets are not physical in nature. Planets are planes of existence, which are a giant mass of energy. And each giant mass of energy has a certain characteristic or certain characteristics of energy they give off, which is impactful on all forms of life. Now, in Vedic astrology, if we are using the words Rahu and Ketu, these words come from the Sanskrit Vedic astrology, and Rahu in Westernology is the north node, and Ketu in Westernology is the south node of the moon. Now, how did both of these shadow planets or planets come into play? Now, the moon and the earth in its orbit at that intersection or interception, that force or energy itself, the birth of Rahu and Ketu. Now, Rahu and Ketu are very, very important planets to talk about or to pay attention to when you are having your natal chart or your Kundali checked. And I'll explain the reasons as to why. Now, depending on the actual astrologer you go to, some of them will focus on Rahu and Ketu and some of them will not. And they all have their various reasons as to why they do and they not. Now, with me as an astrologer, I focus a lot on Rahu and Ketu because Rahu for me shows me where your head is, where your desires are in your natal chart, where your ambitions lie or where your obsessions actually lie. And Ketu is that which you are bringing in from the past life. Ketu is that which the skills that you are bringing from past life. It may not be certain things that you have interest in this life, but it definitely shows me what you have, what skills you are bringing from the past life. Because Rahu and Ketu are the shadow planets, it helps you to understand the energy of the positive thoughts, strategy, and basically proper planning. So Rahu and Ketu are also known as the dragon head. Rahu is the head and the tail is obviously Ketu. Rahu and Ketu are basically the karmic pieces of baggage of the past and are here to deliver it to us through various mediums like Kriya, wealth, professions, relationships. So Rahu and Ketu is the karmic axis or the karmic axis. For example, if Rahu is in the first house, you've got Ketu on the seventh house. If you've got Rahu on the second house, you've got Ketu on the eighth house. They are always opposite each other. The head is always opposite the tail. Like your head is always opposite your legs or furthest away in opposite directions. Now there's major stories about Rahu and Ketu in Hinduism, how they were formed, etc. We're not going to go into all of that. Astro Inudabi is not a religious platform, but more of a spiritual platform. So I'm going to just keep it strictly to the spiritual characteristics of such. Now, the lunar nodes of the moon, aka Rahu and Ketu, or the north and the south node, or the head and the tail in Chinese astrology, here we are talking purely on Vedic astrology. So we have a physical resemblance to each of the planets and stars, right? Their presence is physical and obvious. But in Vedic astrology, there's two planets which, or two planetary objects which are actually not actually physically seen. You can't actually see it. Now, I think this is the reason why they call it the shadow planets. But for me, I still call them planets because they are planes of existence. They're planes or they are dimensions of reality. Yes, they are considered malefic planets. Malefic means not positive. For me, Rahu is more of an abstract entity and responsible for causing an eclipse. Rahu and Ketu are generally named or called two shadow entities. And yes, they are considered malefic. And there are various reasons. You've got to look at other planets where they are in the natal chart. They also play a huge role into what is malefic and what is not. Now, Rahu completes his journey 18 years, and Rahu is always 180 degrees away from Ketu. So it takes Rahu 18 years to complete his journey. And that's a very, very long time. Now, the general characteristics of Rahu and Ketu in astrology. Rahu and Ketu in astrology are considered as one entity, but we take them as different parts. So Rahu is associated with the tamasic, the infatuation of who you are as a human being, your desires, um, your addictions. It's associated with materialistic pleasure and basically worldly desire. It makes the soul surrender to the material life. Therefore, I will explain it as a karak of fame, greed, obsession, manipulation, disease, inertia. Rahu belongs to the Vata nature. A person influenced by Rahu will be an outcast, have a very harsh speech. He will be engrossed in lies, treachery, and will be suffering from thorax and abdomen infestations because such a person is invested in the material world. However, it's considered very powerful and has a capacity of turning friends into enemies and vice versa. Rahu is a malefic planet. However, a favorable Rahu will benefit lots of politicians and criminals. It gives them power and authority to rise in the ranks through unfair means. So it can make you rise in power through unfair means. So Rahu rules the thieves, jail, snakes, poisons, haunted places. It's so hypnotic that people tend to fall for misdeeds easily if they are influenced by Rahu. And it can often bring in sudden wealth to you. If Rahu is considered the planet of worldly desires, Ketu is the polar opposite. Ketu can be related to spirituality. It represents the spiritual process of evolution and refinement and materialization to the spirit. Ketu is worldly malefic, but spiritually benefic. So it may be worldly malefic, but spiritually benefic. Ketu is a crux of spiritualization, wisdom, fantasy, invincibility, and they basically psychic abilities. Ketu belongs to the Pitta element. Ketu generally matures at the age of 48 when the soul starts to turn towards salvation. So Ketu rules the thorax, the lower torso of Rahu. So Ketu, the planet, is sometimes called the half planet that is responsible for wisdom and knowledge of self. It gives the native psychic abilities, and the native generally masters the art of healing. Ketu sign is Pisces. So Ketu sign is Pisces. He loves Pisces, and Rahu is obviously Virgo. So Rahu rules Virgo and Ketu rules Pisces. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, the spiritualist. Ketu is often seen with a gem or star on his head that emits some mysterious light. Now, I'm not going to go into the mythologies of Rahu and Ketu. Let's go into Rahu and Ketu in astrology. Rahu is the master of treachery and showers his blessings on thieves, politicians, culprits, like that. And Ketu is obviously that of spirituality. It can make you very spiritual in nature. Um, I'm not going to go into the dashas and all of that of Rahu and Ketu, and conjunction of different planets and remedies and all of that. I just want you guys to understand that Rahu and Ketu are the north and south nodes of the moon. The polar opposites, they are always 180 degrees apart, and they are the um, karmic axis of the yin and yang. I like to describe them as the yin and yang, the polar opposites, the direct polar opposites, 180 degrees apart. So where Rahu is, Ketu is the polar opposite. So if Rahu is in the third house, then definitely Ketu will always be in the ninth house. If Rahu is in the third house, you will never find it any other. Or Rahu is in the ninth house, Ketu is in the third house. So this is Rahu and Ketu. For me, they are planes of existence. They are planets. In my awareness, they will always be planets, and they are absolutely important in a person's natal chart. So if you are booking a reading, please make sure you double check with your astrologer. Where is my Rahu placed in my Rasi chart? Where is my Rahu placed in my Lagna? And definitely where my Rahu is placed in my Navamsa chart. Taking into these different charts where your Rahu and Ketu is placed, it's best. It's easy to understand what's your soul's mission, what's your karmic lessons, and how to pave a way forward in your life for best return on investment from a soulful perspective and definitely a material perspective. So, Om Namah Shivaya, Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Ram, Hari Bol. Thank you so much for listening to me. Goodbye.